A name that was supposed to stay buried behind a legal redaction. A description specific enough that the internet filled in the blank in under 4 hours. And now Meek Mill is fighting two firestorms at once. One tied to the biggest sex trafficking case in hip-hop history, and one that just broke wide open when Charlemagne Tha God told a podcast audience that his career never recovered. The way those two things collided this week, nobody saw it coming. A court filing drops his name without naming him. Meek goes nuclear on Twitter trying to prove a point the internet never asked for. A media figure tells a podcast he never recovered from Drake. And Charlemagne calls the Diddy denial projection. Live on The Breakfast Club. This is the story of how a redacted paragraph in a drop lawsuit became a 2-year war for Meek Mill's reputation. And why, even now, it is nowhere near over. Let's get into it. Meek Mill has broken his silence on the Diddy accusations. And the denials have been coming fast, furious, and relentless since 2024. He has called it a smear campaign. He has posted receipts. He has put up $100,000 of his own money challenging anyone to prove a real connection. The story of how his name got tangled up in one of the biggest scandals in hip-hop history is wild, it is complicated, and we are going to get into every layer of it in this video. But before we do, you need to know about a specific media figure who has had a front row seat to all of it. Someone who has weighed in on the Diddy rumors, who has commented on Meek's responses, and who Meek has now turned his fire directly toward. That man is Charlemagne Tha God. And things between them just got very personal, very fast. When the Diddy lawsuit started flooding the internet in early 2024, and Meek Mill's name began circulating as the alleged redacted Philadelphia rapper in Lil Rod Jones's civil complaint, Charlemagne Tha God and The Breakfast Club were right there on the front lines covering it. And what Charlemagne had to say about it was not what you might expect. He was not gleefully piling on. He was not co-signing the rumors or adding fuel to the fire. In fact, he did something that surprised a lot of people. He felt bad for Meek. He said so out loud, on air, on a platform with millions of listeners. That is a real observation. And it is actually one of the more nuanced things said publicly about Meek's situation in the middle of all that chaos. Because what Charlemagne was identifying, what he was putting his finger on, was a pattern. The pattern of a man who, no matter how false the accusation, no matter how flimsy the source, cannot stop himself from responding, cannot stop himself from proving, and in doing so, keeps the story alive longer than it ever would have lasted on its own. Every tweet Meek sent defending his sexuality, every rant about women, about the streets, about where he came from, instead of killing the rumor, fed it, gave it oxygen. And the people who were already laughing laughed harder. Nobody cares about the truth when the lie is more entertaining. Let that sit, because that is not just commentary on Meek Mill's specific situation. That is the operating principle of the entire attention economy that we all live inside. And Charlemagne was essentially diagnosing in real time why Meek's very vocal, very passionate, very human defense of himself was backfiring. The Breakfast Club also raised another point that cut even deeper, and it was a point that many people watching at home were already asking themselves. Why is Meek's name in the lawsuit at all? Because the legal answer, and we'll get deep into this in part 2, is that it should not be. The mention of Meek in the Lil Rod Jones civil complaint was not an accusation against him. It was not a claim of victimhood. It was not a charge of criminal conduct. It was hearsay, a second-hand account of something Diddy allegedly boasted about in private. And the lawsuit, for all the noise it generated, was later dropped. But here is the tragedy of the content machine. By the time the legal fact caught up, the jokes had already been written, the memes had already been made, and the narrative had already calcified online. And Charlemagne could see exactly what was happening to Meek in real time. Stop explaining yourself. You do not have to convince nobody. That was Charlemagne's message to Meek, delivered with what sounded like genuine frustration on Meek's behalf. And you know what? From a pure optic standpoint, from the standpoint of media strategy and public perception, Charlemagne was not wrong. The more Meek talked, the more the story lived. The more the story lived, the more memes got made. And the more memes got made, the further the false narrative spread. It was a loop with no exit, and Meek kept choosing to run faster inside it. Now here is where the story takes its sharpest turn. Because what could have remained a relatively contained moment, Charlemagne commentating on Meek's Diddy situation with a mix of sympathy and mild criticism, eventually escalated into something else entirely. Something newer, something that is still unfolding right now as you watch this video. The seed that was planted in those Breakfast Club segments, this idea that Meek keeps hurting himself by over-explaining, by over-engaging, by not just shutting up and dropping music, that seed grew. And it bloomed loudly on an episode of the Brilliant Idiots podcast where Charlemagne said something about Meek's career that Meek absolutely refused to let stand. He never recovered. 4 words. That is all it took. Charlemagne, sitting across from Andrew Schultz on Brilliant Idiots, said that Meek Mill never fully recovered from his 2015 Drake beef, that the Twitter fingers era left a permanent dent in the social media narrative around him that no amount of platinum records has been able to fully smooth out. He gave Meek credit for his Philly community work and his Reform Alliance advocacy. He acknowledged that Meek is talented and that he does great things. But the through line of the argument was clear. Meek's online presence has been his own worst enemy. And the proof is that the jokes have never really stopped. Pure entertainment. Meek Mill, a man with multiple platinum albums, a #1 debut on the Billboard 200, a prison sentence that sparked a national criminal justice conversation, and a nonprofit that has helped pass 22 laws in 12 states, is being described as pure entertainment every time he opens his mouth online. And this time, Meek was done absorbing it quietly. On April 1st, 2026, he dropped an Instagram reel that named Charlemagne directly, listed his post-Drake beef platinum discography item by item, called the fell-off narrative propaganda, attacked Charlemagne personally, and, right there in the middle of all of it, slipped in one more denial of the Diddy accusations that started this whole chain of events. Full circle, one post, everything connected. And when Charlemagne sat down on the Breakfast Club to react to that post, the Diddy line was the part that hit different. There it is. Charlemagne reading Meek's Diddy denial not as a genuine defense, but as a man in pain, lashing out and putting his own insecurities onto others. That is a loaded interpretation, and whether you agree with it or not, it tells you everything about where this beef actually lives, not in platinum tallies or podcast takes, but in the accumulated weight of years of rumors that neither man can fully step out from under. And we are going to break down every word of it, right after we go back and show you exactly how this Diddy situation started in the first place, because you cannot fully understand how hot this fire is burning unless you know what lit the match. February 2024, that is where this all begins. Not with Charlemagne, not with a podcast, not with a Twitter rant. It begins with a civil lawsuit filed by a music producer named Rodney Lil Rod Jones against Sean Diddy Combs that contained, buried somewhere inside its legal language, a paragraph that the internet was never going to let go of. And within hours of those documents starting to circulate online, the name that everyone landed on, without any legal basis, without any direct accusation, without a single name source, was Meek Mill. Watch that reaction. That is the moment of recognition happening in real time. The exact second a content creator reads the filing, sees the description, and the math does itself. Because the document does not use Meek's name. What it says is that Diddy told Lil Rod he had engaged in sexual intercourse with a Philadelphia rapper who dated Nicki Minaj. That is it. That is the entire legal basis for everything that followed. Hearsay, secondhand, an allegation about what Diddy allegedly boasted about in private conversation. Not a charge against Meek, not a claim of victimhood. The name was redacted, but the description was specific enough that social media needed about 4 hours to reach a unanimous verdict. Philadelphia rapper dated Nicki Minaj. Meek Mill dated Nicki Minaj from 2014 to 2016. That detail alone was enough. The internet did not need a name, it had a fingerprint. And what followed was one of the most rapid, most reckless, and most consequential character assassinations that social media has executed on a public figure in recent memory, built entirely on a redacted line in a civil complaint that was later dropped. Blogs picked it up immediately, memes spread by the millions. Explicit audio clips allegedly featuring Meek and Diddy began circulating. Clips that Meek would later call manipulated, artificial intelligence generated, and completely fabricated. The narrative machine was running, and it was running fast. And right-o, in Q, The Breakfast Club covered it, noting that Meek had new music dropping, a project called Heathenism. And instead of a press run, he was dealing with this. And Meek, true to form, true to the pattern that Charlemagne had already flagged as self-defeating, responded hard. He went on X and posted a series of statements that were raw, unfiltered, and deeply human in their desperation to be believed. He pushed back against the gay rumors, defended his sexuality in explicit terms, and made it abundantly clear that he considered the whole thing an attack on his manhood, his brand, and his family, specifically mentioning that his young son was being exposed to the gossip. Now, that kind of post does not help a man's cause on social media. It never does. The more explicit the denial, the more content it creates for the other side. But understand the human being behind the tweet. This is a man who fought his way out of North Philadelphia, who survived a prison sentence that sparked a national conversation, who has been stacking platinum plaques for a decade, and who is now watching all of that get reduced to a joke built on a redacted footnote in a lawsuit that the courts ultimately dismissed. The frustration in those tweets is real. The desperation to be believed is real. And what happened next? The internet laughed, and the Breakfast Club noticed exactly why. That right there is Meek's actual tweet being read on air, and the reaction says everything. Because when your denial becomes the punchline, you have already lost the social media battle, regardless of whether you are telling the truth. And Meek kept going. He posted about rap style. He posted about gangster identity. He was doing something that anyone who grew up where he grew up would understand instantly. He was proving his hood credentials in real time to an audience that had already made up its mind. September of 2024, Diddy was arrested. Federal charges, sex trafficking, racketeering. The world finally started treating the allegations seriously. And with Diddy's arrest dominating headlines, the old Meek and Diddy memes resurfaced with renewed energy. More fake audio, more jokes, more pile-on, and Meek responded with something that nobody expected, a challenge. He offered $100,000 of his own money to anyone who could assemble an investigative team and find real verifiable evidence connecting him to Diddy's criminal activities. He called the circulating audio manipulated and fake. He said it was a coordinated smear campaign amplified by bots. And he said something that has stayed with people since, that he did not believe any Diddy story anymore. Because once they lied about him, once he saw how quickly and carelessly the machine operates, he stopped trusting any of it. November of 2024. Shortly after Diddy's arrest, Meek publicly joined what he called the No Diddy camp, the wave of public figures racing to put clear daylight between themselves and anyone in Diddy's orbit. He posted to say he was not with them, told anyone watching not to disrespect him with that association, and used the viral No Diddy meme language to signal publicly that he considered the relationship severed. It was the clearest, most direct distancing statement he had made up to that point. And it came from a man who was not waiting around to see how the trial played out. He was cutting the rope before anyone could tie it around him. But even that decisive move could not stop the comment sections. Because when a man says, "No Diddy," on his own social media, the internet treats it as confirmation, not denial. That is the trap. That is the cage that Meek has been locked inside for 2 years. May of 2025. Diddy's federal trial was underway. The world was glued to it, and the redacted Philadelphia rapper resurfaced again. Blogs recycling the same paragraph from the same drop lawsuit as if it were breaking news. Meek addressed it again, acknowledging that the Lil Rod complaint never named him directly, but that blogs had weaponized the description against his brand, his image, and his family. And then he said something that was arguably the most grounded and credible thing he said throughout this entire saga. He said the craziest thing he ever witnessed at a Diddy party was coke vibes, drug use, the kind that happens at industry events everywhere. He wasn't exposing Diddy with explosive new details. He was simply contextualizing his own presence in those rooms, saying, "Yes, I was there. Here is what I actually saw." And it was nothing extraordinary. July of 2025. Complex sat down with Meek, and he said it cleanly, on the record, in plain language. "I've never been involved in Puff Daddy's sexual life or personal life, and never have been. I'm being literally upfront about it, to make it known that I am not affiliated." That is a direct denial. That is a man who has said the same thing, in essentially the same terms, for over a year across multiple platforms. And yet the jokes kept coming. Because as The Breakfast Club correctly diagnosed, nobody cares about the truth when the lie is more entertaining. The lawsuit that started all of this was later dropped. The legal basis crumbled. But the memes live forever. And that is the world Meek Mill has been operating in. A world where a dropped civil complaint can permanently alter your public narrative if the algorithm decides it is content. Now we get to the most recent chapter, the one that is still hot as of today. Because even as Meek was navigating years of Diddy gossip, even as he was posting denials, making $100,000 challenges, and giving on-the-record interviews to Complex, there was a parallel conversation building. One that would eventually pull everything together into a single explosive Instagram post. And it started, of all places, with a podcast talking about the Drake beef. Meek's Achilles heel was Twitter. That is what Charlemagne said on Brilliant Idiots. And it is the sentence that started the most recent chapter of this story. The full argument being that Meek never fully recovered from the 2015 Drake beef. Not because his music fell off, not because his talent disappeared, but because his relationship with social media kept the jokes circulating long after they should have faded. Every tweet in Charlemagne's framing was Meek handing ammunition to the people who were already laughing at him. Trigger fingers turned to Twitter fingers. Drake coined that phrase in 2015, and it has followed Meek every single day since. And Charlemagne's point was that Meek, rather than letting that branding die through strategic silence, kept breathing life into it every time he engaged online. The advice was simple in theory. Delete the app, flood the streets with music, let time do its work. The problem is that advice is a lot easier to give from the outside. Now here is what Meek had to say about all of that. And he did not say it quietly. On April 1st, 2026, Meek dropped an Instagram reel that named Charlemagne directly and came loaded with receipts. He asked his audience to leave honest comments about whether his brand was heating back up, and then he started listing, project by project, certification by certification, TAP, 3 times platinum, PETA, double platinum, Blue Notes 1 and 2, platinum, Uptown Vibes with Fabulous, platinum, What's Free, featuring Jay-Z, platinum, F on Me, featuring Cardi B, platinum, Scarface with Rick Ross, gold, 24/7, double platinum, Dangerous, platinum, Championships, double platinum, debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200. That is not a discography that belongs to a man who fell off. That is an artist who has been stacking platinum while the algorithm was busy turning him into a punchline, and Meek wanted it on record, publicly, with names attached. Even Charlemagne said that. Even in the same podcast episode where he said Meek never recovered, he said that. He loves what Meek does with reform. He acknowledges that Meek has been a great symbol for Philadelphia. He gives Meek genuine credit for his community impact. But Meek was done accepting the compliment while the critique kept following him around. He went personal. He wrote in the post that Charlemagne seemed to him like a closet gay man who hates successful black men unless he's doing business with them, adding, "But I could be wrong," at the end, like a man who knows exactly what he just threw, but is covering his exits anyway. It was a grenade, and the comment section treated it like one. And then, Right there, tucked inside all of that, came the Diddy line. The one that connects every part of this video. Meek wrote, "That Diddy shit wasn't normal. I'm a real trench baby, earn plate in front of the world. I would rather die than disrespect what I put blood, sweat, and tears into. And my concerts are jumping." One sentence. 4 years of accumulated weight inside it. Everything. The lawsuit, the fake audio, the blogs, the memes, the Breakfast Club segments, the $100,000 challenge, the complex interview, all compressed into one line that essentially says, "I am from the trenches. I earned everything legitimately, and I refuse to let a lie define me." Charlemagne responded on the Breakfast Club the same day. He clarified his position, that he was never dismissing Meek's music, only the social media strategy around it. He acknowledged the propaganda against Meek is strange, and that it started with the Drake battle and never properly lifted online. He addressed the closet gay jab without fully engaging it. And he held his original ground. Delete the app, talk through the music. He also made a point that actually lands when you sit with it, that Meek is someone G Herbo has credited as the reason he even wanted to get into Muss. I see that Meek has done incredible things in the real world, but that the social media narrative has taken everything he built and tried to make a mockery of it. And Charlemagne seemed genuinely frustrated by that on Meek's behalf, even while holding his position that Meek's own online behavior has contributed to the problem. Two men, one measuring success in platinum plaques and criminal justice reform legislation, the other measuring it in the social media narrative and public perception. Both partially right, both talking past each other, and caught in the middle of all of it is a story that should have died with the Lil Rod lawsuit, but instead has followed Meek Mill through every public moment of the last 2 years. What is not in dispute, what every credible source and legal document confirms, is that Meek Mill was never directly accused of anything in connection with Diddy's criminal case. No charges, no named allegations, no victim testimony. What existed was hearsay in a dropped civil complaint, amplified by blogs, animated by memes, and kept alive by the content economy's insatiable appetite for scandal. Meek's position across every statement from 2024 to 2026 has been identical. He was not involved in Diddy's sexual life or personal life, period. And perhaps most tellingly, nobody in Diddy's legal case, not a single accuser, not a single attorney, not a single document filed with any court, has named Meek Mill as a participant in Diddy's alleged crimes. The entire narrative that haunted Meek for 2 years was built on a redacted description in a complaint that the plaintiff himself eventually walked away from. That is the foundation. That is what the jokes were built on. A piece of paper that no longer legally exists. Whether you believe him, as we said in part 1, is between you and your conscience. But now you have the full picture. The lawsuit, the redacted name, the fake audio, the $100,000 challenge, the Coke Vibes confession, the complex interview, the Charlemagne beef, the Instagram reel, the platinum receipts, and the single line that ties it all together. A man from North Philadelphia saying, with everything he has, that he would rather die than let a lie bury what he built.